The Athletic.
Are we about to get another Yamaha versus Ducati MotoGP title fight? No, we're probably not. That's too optimistic. But the first test of the 2025 pre-season has two big storylines coming out of it. One is that Yamaha is looking genuinely like it has reasons to be happy. The other is that Ducati, well, it's being Ducati. It's doing the things we expect. But there's some quirks along the way. This is the Race MotoGP podcast, and the whole family is back together. It's me, Matt Beer, and Val Khorounzhiy, and Simon Patterson. Shaggy, Scooby, and Velma back in the same place for the first time for a few episodes, after a few two-handers, which were around travel schedules, logistics schedules, and trying to pump out videos at the same time. But all three of us are here. It's lovely to see both your faces on my screen. Simon's even smiling. Oh, Val's smiling too.
I'm semi-delusional. It's great. It's been a long week.
I'm just trying to figure out how you looked for trios that you know, and you went for the Scooby-Doo gang, which is famously 5 people. Well, not people, I guess, but you know.
Val, are you unaware of the Shaggy Scooby comparisons for you two?
Oh,
the Race Members Club has been
okay.
making. That's with yeah.
Ruh-roh, I guess.
Well, I guess the issue is who actually owns the van, because this is part of it. Simon.
I mean, it was always
used to
Scooby's
live in
van
a van.
anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We all know that.
Yeah, exactly.
I do like giant sandwiches.
What a disaster.
Oh, this is such a...
So I'm going to get this back on track by saying that part of the reason I'm slightly delusional tonight, a little bit giddy, is that I genuinely, I really enjoyed these 3 days of testing, because loads of things happened. Like, it was 3 solid, entertaining tests. We've had 3 days of MotoGP testing where we've went and the same people have, like, just went around at the same speed and nothing dramatic has happened and nothing interesting has happened, and it's been super boring. That was not one of those. Like, it was cracking entertainment. This is the first test in ages. I felt quite sorry for people that wasn't televised, and I'm of the opinion that no test should ever be televised because they're boring. So, take from that what you will.
Simon, it was just me and you on the Yamaha and People Being Broken podcast on Wednesday. So when we talked on Wednesday about form on day one, there was a degree of Yamaha looks great, but it's had the shakedown. Fabio Quartararo's warmed up properly. Is this real? A couple of days on, it really does look real. The pace has been consistently really good from Quartararo in particular.
Yeah. So he is adamant that this is not a shakedown boost, that this is actually the level at Sepang.
Yeah.
Should clarify that. It's not the level everywhere, and it certainly won't be the level at Buriram, but right now at Sepang, this is the level. And that kind of aligns with what we expected from them maybe being possible this year in terms of being, semi-regular podium contenders, maybe even fighting for the occasional race win, but not everywhere, as we'd expect from a rebuilding year. So it's there, it's coming. First of all, the bike is seemingly fast in a straight line. Kind of probed a few of them about that today, and they were all pretty pleased with it. It's got really impressive race pace again, like proper old school Yamaha consistent race pace, which is lovely. It seems to be all right in time attack mode, which has been like its biggest weakness out of everything. The most interesting thing from the whole test is that whenever you look at the fastest ever lap per manufacturer versus the fastest ever lap per manufacturer this week, Honda and KTM have found a 10th, Aprilia and Ducati have lost a 10th, and Yamaha found nearly a second.
Yeah.
Over 0.8 of a second. And the most impressive, the biggest praise for Yamaha today didn't come from a Yamaha rider, it came from Pecco Bagnaia. Because I asked him what he thought of the Yamaha pace at the end of the day, and he said Yamaha will be the number 2 bike in the Manufacturers' Championship this year. They're going to take over the Aprilia thing. They're going to take over the KTM. They're going to be, he expects number 2, and he specifically singled out the time attack, the qualifying pace that has been absent for a long time, being back again. And he very much said it in they're not a threat to us. They're going to be number 2 to us. They're not going to be number 1 to us. But that's fairly high praise from someone that's, been on track with them for 3 days. He also mentioned the shakedown thing and the fact that they've had 2 extra days of running here, but also said that that's a factor, but it's not the be all and end all. That they're just quick.
Yeah. I mean, they couldn't sniff a 156 in the test last year. They couldn't sniff it during the race weekend, and then suddenly Fabio Quartararo is in the 156 very, very comfortably. And that's, Pecco Bagnaia is right, that is the most important thing. I think, the top speed is meaningful, but we already, the Yamaha already had okay top speed last season, just couldn't put it on the ground regularly because it compromised the rest of the lap. It wasn't really achievable for a rider. They had to dial it out, which an extra year of engine development under this engine program, Luca Marmarini, etc., that was always, I think, going to be better. But the fact that the single lap problem, which they had for 2 years now, seemingly with no real answer to, I just had no idea why the race pace wasn't translating into single lap, and suddenly, bam, they have it. It's there. I mean, the race pace and the single lap totally aligned through this test, and I think even in varying grip conditions too, not just in the peak grip of the final day. It is a tremendous sign. It is really good. I can totally see the argument for second best bike, with, of course, the caveat of Jorge Martin's absence and Aprilia's inexperienced lineup. So, and with the other caveat that it's still just Fabio Quartararo doing it.
I'm just going to say that, I thought Pecco Bagnaia's praise of Yamaha was the most impressive thing said about them today, but actually it's Val's, because it's Yamaha we're talking about.
Yeah, very, very good point. The Yamaha skeptic sounds convinced. What do we know about what Yamaha has changed for this season as well, Simon? Are there obvious visible things on the bike, or is this actually just everything coming to fruition?
I actually think it's one of those little bits of everything. The aero has been updated slightly and looks a bit more incorporated than it used to be. It looks like the the aero is now designed into the bike rather than a bit of an afterthought. We know that they've got a new engine that's a bit faster, both straight line and acceleration, which has obviously been a long-standing issue. They've got multiple new chassis that they've been trying out, new swinging arms they've been trying out, but there's no one area that has made this a big step forward. It's just kind of the culmination of a lot of work from last year. The gradual evolution of the bike into this one. Yamaha are the manufacturer that's been talking about how there is no 2024 M1 and 2025 M1. There's a straight line stretching from Misano test last year to where we are now and beyond, where they've been constantly evolving rather than making big steps. And that's, that is kind of it. No one has pinpointed any one area of the bike as being the thing that's fixed it all.
It's got to be electronic settings, at least to a considerable degree, isn't it? Also because we're seeing the top speed being accessed, which, when the engine is already capable of producing it, what you need to do then is to figure out the setup to make sure you can put it on the track. And electronics has been a major focus. I mean, still this week, Jack Miller, one of the new recruits, said that it's still not quite there, but he also said that I think Fabio Quartararo uses the setup that the other riders can't quite use right now. So they all sort of need to figure out their own way for, putting the power on the track and presumably also the braking and all that noise. It does sound like just no one specific aspect. And Quartararo, he didn't sound like over the moon happy, but I think his face betrayed the real emotion behind that. All right, this is actually going to be a season.
I have not seen Fabio Quartararo's face on video footage looking like that for a long time. It was like, it wasn't the I'm smiling because I'm resigned to this and I'm finding something kind of bleakly funny. It was, I'm actually happy. This is going somewhere. This is good. Thing is, though, like you say, Fabio Quartararo can access something in the bike the others can't to the same degree right now. We'll get to Alex Rins in a minute because he's a whole separate conversation. But I feel like if you give Fabio Quartararo the second best bike on the grid, I wouldn't say Quartararo has been phoning it in for a few years by any means. I don't think he has, but he's been riding a bike he knows can't get him anywhere. He's been over-riding it at times. Quartararo, who thinks he can actually fight for something realistic, we're going to see him back to his actual best. And that could make the difference if it's close with Ducati a few times, I feel.
I mean, I will say one thing. He has been completely vindicated in his decision to stick with Yamaha whenever half the world were telling him that he was crazy and only doing it for the money.
Yeah, Val.
No, he has all the money and the second best bike in MotoGP. And you got to think he's coming into this year a bit more fired up. There has to be places he's looking at and thinking, going to win there. for the first time since the middle of 22. He's got to be targeting race wins this season, and that's not in any way unrealistic.
I completely vindicated in terms of like versus Aprilia. Yeah, I think so. I think that's accurate.
Which was his only other real option. Let's be honest.
I don't know. I always said like satellite Ducati was always my idea, and you put Fabio Quartararo right now and say Alex Marquez's bike, and I think the Works Ducati guys are. I think they would be legitimately terrified at that prospect. So.
I'm not as convinced as I would have been about that, because it took Marc Marquez a year to learn the bike.
True.
No, that's kind of it. Took him 9 months to be able to win 3 races, and I think Fabio's going to be able to win or fight for 3 races this season.
Yeah,
on the bike that he's on, without taking the probably €7.5 million pay cut that Guido Cassini would have been, and that's not an exaggeration number wise. Like that's
I can imagine. We referenced Jack Miller and some of his feedback on the bike a moment ago. Pramac Yamaha seems to have started well. Both Miller and Miguel Oliveira have had some good times on the board. The thing that Miller has said more than once this week that I've been really interested in, though, he's like the loudest advocate maybe for not bothering with a V4 right now and sticking with the inline 4. And now we've got a lot of the season to get into the Yamaha engine dilemma, especially if its current inline 4 bike starts going very quickly. But it is very interesting the degree to which Miller and the Yamaha riders are like, we're making the inline 4 work. It's potentially a big quandary there.
Miller made a great point at the team launch to me, where he compared the rush to have a V4 to the rush to have a Boscoscuro chassis in Moto2, just because it's the one that was quick most recently. And his argument was that Yamaha and Suzuki have done a fair bit of winning recently with inline 4s, considering they were in a minority on the grid. They've still won quite a few titles, and that maybe it's not the way to go. And like, if new tech boss Max Bartolini has come on board and actually finally been able to figure out a way to make the inline 4 competitive with the current state of MotoGP with aero and ride height devices and everything, what's not to say that the inline 4 isn't actually more suited to it? I
mean, the good inline 4 that we've had most recently, I mean, this looks like a good inline 4, but if we don't talk about this one, it's not the 21 title-winning Yamaha one, is it? That one was okay, but it wasn't the strong suit of the bike. It's the 22 Suzuki.
It's the second half of 22 Suzuki.
Yeah, exactly. That was a very good engine that they just didn't follow up on. So there's still relatively recent proof of that kind of package being quite competitive. It's just a question of also how it behaves in race trim, I guess.
I remember loads of talk that pre-season. You remember about
there's
a new engine coming in, it's going to be awesome, and everyone was a little bit skeptical, and then it arrived, and we were like, okay, this is.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to Sylvain Gattoli in pit lane just down here after the first time he tried it, being like, "You're not going to believe the feedback that the racers are going to give when they try this. This is wow." And it kind of, that's what happened. It was able to hold its own in the straights while still being an inline 4 through the corners. One other thing, just before while we're talking about Pramac, my favourite line or comment or anything from the weekend was someone asked Miguel Oliveira if Pramac felt like a real factory team this year, as the reigning world champions with a full factory packet, and he just laughed and was like, "Do you know where I was last year?"
Yes.
Which is brutal to track out, but with the amount of technical DNFs they had, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, indeed. Alex Rins, let's mention him quickly. Quartararo was getting the headline times. Rins was off that pace. If Yamaha's looking... So, Bagnaia is saying Yamaha could be second in the Manufacturers' Championship. Yamaha needs 2 competitive works riders to do that, really, doesn't it? And for reasons I think are fairly obvious, right now Rins still doesn't look like he's going to be that, even with the bike being better. Simon, what have you made of Rins this week when you've seen him?
I mean, it is now 608 days since Alex Rins broke his leg at Mugello, and people are still asking him if his leg is a hindrance to him on the bike, and he's still walking around with a crutch. He's not, can't be fully fit. I fundamentally can't believe that you can be fully fit to ride a MotoGP bike whenever you're not fully fit to walk unaided.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what it's going to take to give him the time to fully recover that leg. But right now, it's hard for me to kind of align the two things where I see him limping and hobbling through the paddock versus he says he's fully fit when he jumps on the bike and is trying to be competitive as Quartararo. There is one huge glaring obvious reason why he's struggling, and it's nothing to do with the bike or his talent.
So the numbers from the sort of the lap times from the test and the test throughout, it hasn't looked very convincing, has it? In light of Yamaha's general progress. I mean, he did finish ahead of the two Pramac newcomers, but I think over one lap it's like 8 or 9 tenths of Fabio, and he didn't do it at the optimal time because they sort of delayed the push lap because he wasn't feeling comfortable with the bike, which is also telling because Fabio sounds like he's been comfortable with the bike all week, every exit basically, and Rins is still not there. If you look at what both of them did approximating long runs, what I have in front of me right now, it's like also a 9/10 difference on average, which is impossible. So we don't know what that Rins run was. We don't really know what that Quartararo run was. It was a pretty small collection of laps, but there's a fairly high degree of confidence that we can say right now that Fabio is just a lot more performant again coming into the season. And if this is going to be the bike, Alex Rins insisted last season that he needs a bike that's also closer to his liking, that he can exploit better. But that's supposed to be this bike. So, yeah.
Okay, we've talked about Yamaha being much, much better, but even if Yamaha gets a lot better, it still has to beat the latest Ducati, which has Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia on it. Interesting week for the factory Ducati team, Val. Not a bad week by any means, and some of the lap times you've been studying on longer runs were kind of terrifying for anybody who's not on one of those bikes. But they've also got a dilemma to figure out, and it's maybe a surprisingly complicated one.
Yeah. Although maybe not that surprisingly, given how good the previous bike is. But yeah, it's basically homologation windows are coming up. What do you change? What do you keep? And the big question mark is, of course, the new engine. They have a newer engine version, an engine that has been described as more smooth with. I think Pecco Bagnaia called it the best power delivery he's ever seen from an engine out of the box. So like the most smooth, the most compliant, but an engine that comes with a braking deficit that's apparently quite obvious on even the sector time splits, not just from rider feedback. And for them right now, it's a question of under the engine freeze, they don't have a lot of freedom in going back, not just this year but next year. So it's a 2-year engine freeze to see us through this regulation cycle. So even if there is conviction that the GP25 engine will have a greater room to grow, a greater ceiling, a greater potential, whatever, they can exploit more of it through, electronic settings, etc. That conviction might not be worth it. Marc has used the word conservatism in terms of, making this decision, because bird in the hand, two in the bush, or whatever, however they say that, it's the exact dilemma they're facing right now. Pecco Bagnaia described it as 50-50. Marc said the same. That's a decision that's coming in the Buriram test. Right now, they're not so sure. I'd say Pecco sounds more pro the 25 than Marc. The engine specifically, I mean, that's my feeling from what they've been saying. I think there's a slight difference there, not in the tone more so than in the actual words. That's a weird way to put it, but I see Simon nodding along. I think he sort of picked up a similar potential division.
Yeah, I think Pecco is the one that's kind of more content with the direction that we're going in. Marc is the one that sounds quite a bit more conservative, which is quite unusual. It's not really Marc Marquez, but yeah, he definitely sounds like Mr. Play It Safe here.
Yeah.
I presume that an element of that is because Marc has more experience, or Pecco has more experience with the factory and how the factory operates and how development goes and how the bike feels. Because, realistically, they've both been talking a lot about how aligned their feedback is.
Yep.
And about how their kind of their preferences are quite similar. So I can only assume then that it is kind of Marc just, I mean, I'm not saying that Pecco's being a bit more gung-ho about this, but this is like Marc needs this to be right.
Yeah.
More than Pecco does. Marc this is realistically, this is Marc's last engine to win a championship with. It has to be perfect.
Pecco's got time.
Yeah. And also it's worth noting that Pecco's went from a 24 bike to a 25 bike, whereas Marquez went from a 23 bike to a 25 bike. So Pecco knows the intermediate step a lot better. He knows probably the limitations of the 24 engine a lot more than Marc does at this point. He knows where it's not so good at other tracks. So it makes sense that they're kind of falling into those two directions that they are. But I think we'll probably see a resolution that goes with the 25 engine because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. This is not Suzuki with the wrong flywheel on the 19 bike that sabotaged their whole season. This is fine detail, and generally fine detail on engines can be tuned out electronically. Yeah, it can be managed with a bit of time. And then whenever they're still switching between 24 and 25, we don't exactly know what they're doing. It sounded today from reading between the lines, even though neither of them would answer the question when I asked it straight up, it kind of sounded like Marc was running a 25 engine and a 24 frame today, while maybe Pecco was running a 24 engine and a 25 frame to get the best of both worlds and to kind of develop a bit of everything. They haven't really sat down and started doing electronics work on those yet. So there's loads of room. I would imagine they'll make a decision the next few days. With the Bangkok launch coming up before the Buriram test, Marc and Pecco are going to have a fair bit of time together to kind of flesh things out. They're going to have a fair bit of time with the engineers because they'll have a couple of days before the start of testing again at Buriram. And I'd imagine they'll probably aim to go into that test with a decision made. And then they've got 2 days to refine it electronically into something that's competitive for round one.
When Simon's talking about those spec differences, it's specific. Obviously, they're all trying everything, but you're specifically talking about the sprint simulations because that's the big sort of headline figure from today. And the sprint simulations, obviously, Marc's was really good. Pecco's was not so good. It was like 0.3 off a lap. It was not terrible by any stretch.
It would have won the sprint race here in November, we should say.
Yeah. But Marc's was
comfortable margin.
Yeah, Marc's was eye popping. Although we'll get in a second to another race simulation that was also eye popping. Yes. But Pecco had some sort of vibration. He just didn't feel too great about that one. So that maybe isn't fully representative of the whatever package that is. And again, we don't really know what package that even is. It's not. It's a big dilemma, and Ducati has been bit not that long ago, a couple of years ago, by some spec uncertainty that wrote off a Jorge Martin season kind of effectively, that almost compromised a title fight against a then already quite bad Yamaha. But so I can see why you would feel a bit conservative about that, especially Marc, who did not get to ride that GP24 for a full season and benefit from its mega speed. I think what adds to the fear, but also maybe will add to the calculation in the end is, the GP24s are still in the grid. They are still the biggest problem. If the GP24s weren't there, then I think whatever, right? Kind of. Not whatever, but your biggest threat right now is just the older Ducati that might be better. But the riders on it aren't Jorge Martin.
Yeah, this is it.
They're good riders, but they're not Jorge Martin.
Yeah. It's quite funny that there's obviously a complete veto on Ducati riders telling us what spec they were riding today, to the extent that Pecco Bagnaia admitted that the hardest part of this test is speaking to the media every day and not saying anything.
Yeah. I think the exact thing he said is he's come in and he's like, I have to say a lot without saying anything. Yeah. And I'm like, Pecco, you're not supposed to say that. Like, I get it. I know the game, but you're not supposed to admit that to us.
Yeah, let's talk about those 2024 Ducatis. It always used to be that I say always, we had a few solid years where the first test, the first few races, what you actually wanted to be on was last year's Ducati that was fresh from dominating that season, was well sorted, no problem. Last year, that wasn't the case, mainly thanks to the new Michelin rear tyre just changing what's required of the bike and the old Ducati not working with that. This year, back to the old routine. 2024 Ducati's fastest, 2 of the 3 days, with Franco Morbidelli at VR46 on Thursday and Alex Marquez for Grassini topping a test in front of a few places ahead of his brother on Friday. The downside, like you say, this is Marc's brother. This is Morbidelli trying to refine his form. This is Fermin Aldeguer as a rookie. We will have Fermin Aldeguer corner Val because he's had a good week. But if this was someone like Jorge Martin on this year-old bike, you'd be going, okay, massive pressure on the factory to make the right decision because your old bike could beat you to this title. I don't think that's the situation. But are we going to see Morbidelli versus Alex for the race win first time out?
I mean, the works Ducatis will certainly be in the mix and maybe still half a step ahead, but it depends on the track. But it's eminently plausible. It's extremely plausible. And I should say, Alex Marquez at Sepang might as well be Giacomo Agostini or whatever, right? So there's also that consideration.
It is Marc at Coda, isn't it?
Yeah, he's consistently very, very, very good at Sepang, and it's no secret to anybody. Had not just the headline lap time, had a sprint simulation today that, as good as Marc's was, Alex's was 0.03 of a second quicker on average per lap, and with a peak lap that was nearly 0.3 better. Which, knowing how Alex Marquez approaches races, he usually drops off more than Marc, certainly, I would say. So to me, that actually tells me that the GP24 is super good in Sepang trim and in sprint trim. Super, super good. Again, depending on what Marc ran, we don't have really a full idea yet, definitively. Sepang's not soon, is it, right? Sepang's a ways away.
Yeah, it's the wrong end of the calendar.
Yeah.
But otherwise, bet on Alex.
His silver lining was that, at least he gets to finish the year at a strong point.
Yeah. But
because I did ask him about it.
But he will also, so there's no evidence right now that he won't be good elsewhere. Was also good in the Barcelona postseason test. And
that's another one of his circuits, isn't it? Barcelona, Aragon, places like that. Somebody
asked Marc about like an Alex title challenge potentially.
Yeah.
And Marc was like, I don't want to put that pressure on him right now. I just want him to enjoy it. But it's not a ridiculous question suddenly at the point. I think
the problem is that an Alex season will be, I think Alex's season this year, with the way that everything is, will be broken into 3 different types of races. There'll be the races where he's fighting for the win, there'll be the races where he's fighting for P14, and there'll be the races where he's knocking people off by being like over the limit, because that's kind of what Alex does.
Yeah.
But except the difference is this year that he won't be fighting for P4 or P5 on those good days. He'll be at the sharp end.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a ton of potential there. It's just, he's never going to be super consistent. He's never been super consistent. He's a double world champion who's never been super consistent.
True.
Yeah, when I say that's not a ridiculous question, that doesn't mean that like I see a scenario in which there's an Alex Marquez title challenge. But I mean, he enters the season as one of the fastest rider bike combinations. That's what I mean, which is quite notable.
Should point out that if you ask Pecco Bagnaia, Alex Marquez was pretty damn pivotal in the 2024 championship when it came to Aragon. Do you know what? It was genuinely really refreshing today to turn up to Marc Marquez, factory Ducati and fully fit MotoGP 8-time world champions rider debrief and have like the first 10 questions be about his brother being faster than him. It was so unusual. It's so like the opposite of what we're used to, that it was really nice. And Alex was like absolutely firing shots at Marc in his debrief. Like, well, yeah, he should have went faster, and it's not easy being as quick as me, and all the sort of things you'd expect from him. But this is a guy that's never topped a test before and has now done 2 tests in a row. There is absolutely race winning potential in him this year, and I hope there is, because he's a good character, and it'll do the championship no harm to have that Marquez at the pointy end of it now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking through our photo supply from our partner Golden Goose, and there's loads of Marc and Alex next to each other doing a practice start. That we get loads of those. They often line up together for the practice starts. There's also one of Alex coming back into the pit lane. It's a shot of Marc's back, and you can't see what Marc's gesticulation is at the front, but you can tell from the body angle that he is in some way gesticulating at his little brother.
I wonder what it is.
I wonder.
A million possibilities.
To quote Goose in Top Gun, keeping up international relations.
Let's talk briefly about Alex's Grassini teammate Fermin Aldeguer, who didn't get the headline times, but very decent first week as a proper MotoGP rider. Simon, you had a bit of a chat behind the scenes with Frankie Carcetti, his crew chief, about how he's getting on.
Yeah.
And the vibe was good, wasn't it?
Bumped into Frankie on Thursday afternoon, so halfway towards the end of day 2. And we'd kind of joked that he had done the usual Frankie Carcetti thing of basically spending the 4 days up to then doing ergonomics and rider positioning, and that they'd adopted a kind of what he described as a Jorge Lorenzo style tank cover to allow Aldeguer to use his legs more to brake, to take a bit more weight off his shoulders, which had really helped him. He'd made a big step from the shakedown, and then Frankie had said the plan for Friday afternoon, the end of the test, is do a race simulation, sprint simulation, and I want to see every lap in it in the 58s. And Fermin went out, end of the day, did exactly what he was told. Has been consistently fast on one lap pace, was really impressively fast on that sprint simulation, looking really good.
So Val, you were right.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's just the first proper test, I guess, and you have the shakedown.
Yeah.
I would say I think Aldeguer has looked really good this week.
Yeah,
and even Samkia Chantra towards the end is he's getting somewhere. He's doing all right. He's having a reasonable start to his MotoGP career. On Aldeguer's side, it helps that the bike's mega. Obviously, clearly.
Well, this reminded me of is how often a rookie turned up on the old spec Yamaha and had a great start to the MotoGP career back in the day. And I think we haven't seen that same effect for a little bit, but I think we might get that with Aldeguer, given which team he's joined and what bike it's got.
The Tech 3 career pipeline at Yamaha, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's sort of very plausible here. I think it's still, that final bit of single lap pace will probably take a little bit to access, I would imagine. The sprint sim was reasonable, was decent. It's interesting. I don't think it was as good a test as Acosta had last year. Acosta last year, I think Aldeguer not quite there, but it wasn't as far off as maybe some of the doom and gloom over Aldeguer's 24 suggested. That's how I would put it. This is what Ducati's seen in him, basically.
And let's also give a bit of credit to Franco Morbidelli, fastest on the final day. Obviously, maybe not too much to read into that, but if Morbidelli wasn't back on the pace when he's basically riding the bike that he had all year last year, is probably definitely the most sorted bike on the grid right now, in a team of people he's worked with in various ways for his whole life, pretty much. It just wasn't going to happen, was it? So best case here, though, is the absolute best case is that we get that late 2020 thing of actually Morbidelli's the one who's most comfortable for a little while and is absolutely making hay. I can't quite see that happening, but I was pleased to see him just back at the sharp end again on times, and it looked like it might stick.
It's genuinely really, really nice to see Frankie happy and smiling again. He looks like the 2019 Frankie. He looks like he's found his mojo again. He admitted that he's literally got the same bike as he had last year. His biggest adjustment this year is learning a new crew. And he said at the end of the test, it had felt like 3 months, not 3 days with them, that they clicked really well. And, there were obviously a lot of familiar people in the team. He was joking earlier in the weekend about how he knows his rider and video analyst quite well, because they had a fairly competitive run on the 100 kilometers flat track race at Rossi's Ranch together, because it's Andrea Migno, and so there's a lot of people in the team that he knows, but he's never worked with them. And that's a different thing. So it seems like it's all clicked really well. Like they've bonded really well. And yeah, by and large, he's just happy to be fast again. It feels like there's been weight lifted off his shoulders, and suddenly he's relieved and happy, and that's what we're seeing.
And his team, VR46 teammate Fabio Giannantonio, obviously absent from the final part of this test. We talked about Digi's situation quite a lot on Wednesday. The only thing I'd like to add to that is I was making dinner last night. I could hear my kids playing in the other room, and they were playing Doctors, and I heard, and they've been following the test a fair bit as well. And I heard one of them say, "I've broken my collarbone showing off."
They've nailed that. That is exactly what he did.
Yeah. And that's good punditry for a 3 or 5 year old. almost all of our Yamaha chat for the last couple of years has come with kind of Honda hand in hand in it, as we talk about them as the Japanese Cup, the strugglers who've forgotten how to win in MotoGP and need to start from scratch. Obviously, there's positivity around Yamaha at this test and beforehand. Loads of positivity radiating from Joan Mir at Honda, which hasn't happened in a while. But Val doesn't quite fit with what we're seeing. You know, it's not a terrible test. They haven't gone backwards, but there's still an awful lot of question marks over Honda right now.
Yeah, Mir suggested it was like the best test he's had in the time at Honda, but he's had a few tests that have felt good and that have even sometimes looked good on the surface. I still think his first test on the Honda is kind of his best one, which isn't great, but that's how it feels right now. Like it turns better. I think he's probably at least slightly relieved that it isn't vibrating at the same level as it was through most of last year for him. You know, the rear vibration that really took a toll on his campaign. But the lap times are just kind of there. I don't know. There's got to be some other reason for what is a fairly positive rhetoric, specifically for Mir, because I think Zarco and Marini more circumspect, generally speaking. But Mir has been really, really happy. But it's got to be something that I'm not seeing, because he said they're clearly much closer than they were before. Gap looks the same to me. Gap over longer-ish runs looks the same to me. Bike still has problems, still not great over a straight, still not great in rear grip. I mean, he didn't crash, did he? So that's good.
That's very good.
Yeah. I assumed he would have done.
It's a puzzle I'm trying to piece together in my head still, and there's probably some sort of answer that isn't just preseason delusion. It needn't be, you know, we needn't be too harsh, because, you know, Luca Marini has spoken through like the off season and the preseason that really the expectation is that the step that Honda is supposed to take, it should take really in the second half of the upcoming season. Just the way they see it from there, and also that's when the Romano Albiciano effect will be felt of their new big name technical hire from Aprilia, who there's no way he's had the impact he's supposed to have yet. It's just not possible in that time frame. So it's not. I don't want to sound like it's a bad test. It's almost like if I sound a little negative, it's because I find myself in a mismatch between how the rider sounds and what the lap times look. And I mean lap times, not just the peak lap times of both of them being in the top 10, because that I don't think that the Mir and Zarco, because that doesn't matter so much when the gap is still the same as it was. So for me, it's more confusion than negativity. There's no need to be negative, but it's just, you guys sure this was as good as you're making it sound?
Well, I think the thing when you get past Yamaha and Ducati, Yamaha obviously improved. There's loads of tangible evidence. Ducati, you can see new bike quick, Developmental fix, 2024 bike looking great. Then you get to the other three, and trying to work out where Honda, Aprilia, and KTM all stand right now is a little bit thorny. You saying how confusing it was reminded me a little bit of a behind-the-scenes shambolic secret, but in our video that we're putting out today on the YouTube channel as well, it's the 5 things we learned from the test. And section 5 in that was for a long time called Mystery Fifth Topic, to the point where I nearly got producer Rob to actually make a title graphic saying that. That is kind of where, you know, 3, 4, and 5 in the pecking order right now is a little bit sketchy. Simon, what did you make of Honda and the riders' vibe there the last few days?
They're certainly happier, much happier with the work that Honda have done over the winter now than they were at the team launch like 5 days ago. Like there is a palpable sense of relief within the Honda camp that, things are not as bad as we'd expected it to be. I think largely based on a rather disappointing Barcelona test at the end of last year. There has been progress. It keeps coming back to what we've said, you know, keep saying it over and over again. Fundamentally, they're a year behind Yamaha. And this is everything is moving in the right direction finally, but it just needs more time. And, you know, there are positive signs, but they're the same sort of positive signs that there were last year at this test from Yamaha. And it's, you know, it's a year down the line and we're celebrating them kind of coming back to form. And yeah, I just can't get past that. They're on the right path. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
They also don't have Fabio Quartararo.
They really don't, no.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be in a position where they're aiming to have a Fabio Quartararo in 27, but they don't have one right now.
Yeah.
There's a whole conversation here for another day on how Mir fits into that, because regardless of the circumstances of his title, when he was coming to MotoGP, you'd have mentioned him as someone who would be in that kind of conversation. And now, with this far in, he's had all those crashes last year. He's had the seasons he's had, and you were all saying Honda needs to go and buy a superstar.
I mean, I should say I still rate Mir as a talent,
Of course.
but I think that he's so beaten right now that it's going to take a lot of work to kind of unearth that again. And I don't even know if it's possible at Honda. I don't know if he'd just be better, like, buggering off to get himself a fast satellite Ducati somewhere. And then,
I rate all of them as talents.
They are, but they're not Quartararos.
Yeah, I know.
I still think Fabio vies for the top rider in the grid in terms of talent right now still.
Yeah. And out of the people at Honda, Mir's the one who you might have had in that conversation at some point, whereas the others are doing Marini and Zarco doing a great job for the roles they're there for, but they're not that. They've never been seen as that kind of wow.
With no ill will in the world towards Johan Zarco, I'd be surprised if he ever races an 850cc MotoGP bike, based on his age and his,
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Honda is obviously waiting for its ex-Aprilia guy to take effect. Let's have a quick chat about how Aprilia did. I mean, Aprilia was the whole topic of our podcast on Wednesday because it had lost 2 of its 4 riders, including its new world champion. Val, how has Aprilia done for the rest of the week with the riders it had left?
Pretty good, right?
Pretty good considering.
Pretty good considering. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm going to reuse the same joke I used in the web version of this discussion, but other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? It was such an unsettling start to the 3 days that anything you can salvage from it has to be a positive. But Marco Bezzecchi, he is new to that bike. It's not the simplest bike to get a hold of, and I think the fact that he both set his fastest lap of Sepang and did a reasonable race simulation, I think those are really good signs. I think, obviously the gap to the front is still big, and obviously we don't really expect Aprilia to take on Ducati this season, but the fact that they've sort of had a bit of a plug-in and play week with Bezzecchi, the fact that Bezzecchi looked competitive, because at the start it was a little bit shaky, but gradually progressing through the week, the lap times were coming up, and they were okay, they were sensible. I think that's a really nice sign. That says decent things about the 25 bike that they have available, which tester Lorenzo Savadori has described as, incremental still, because the base balance is good, but riders sound reasonably happy with it. Obviously, the level of happiness will depend on the pace relative to other bikes, but it's, for a disaster start to the season, for me it's pretty easy to find one silver lining, and it's pretty easy to find another too. I think, again, Aldeguer looked legit. I think he had a very, very, very reasonable start to his MotoGP career.
He did, but he started to come out of his shell a little bit as someone that has always been quite quiet. And his debriefs have just been hilarious because he is so brutally mean about himself.
Oh,
someone said to him today, like Davide Brivio had said to them, that he's super precise in his braking, especially into turn 1. He was like, "No, I'm not. I'm terrible at it, and especially in turn 1, it's a disaster." so he's so critical of himself, but then speaking to Brivio and some of the Trackhouse guys, that is working to his favor, because basically they bring something new into the mix, and he will not move on until it's perfect. So he's building this really slow but perfect, steady progress towards being a MotoGP rider, and the team are loving it, because it is the right way to do it, but it's something that a lot of riders don't have the patience for. So he has so much more potential than we've seen yet. There's so much more to come from Agura. Quite excited about it, actually.
Yeah, I'm utterly convinced he will be good. Mm-hmm. Utterly, and I mean, a small part of that is because Davide Brivio decided so, and I generally trust his talent evaluation. So yeah, but
who's he ever picked that turned out to be all right? Like Rins and Mir.
The remaining mystery is KTM. Quite hard to judge this week. A very KTM test in terms of just not having its final package all on the bike at once just yet. So Pedro Acosta popped up quite perky on the lap times a few times, but we can't really say where KTM are relative now, can we?
I feel like we go through this process every single winter with KTM where they're nowhere in testing and people start to panic. And then this year doubly panic because of all the financial stuff that's going on. But it's just KTM. It is just KTM. They build a bike to go racing with on basically the final day of testing out of all the quite good parts that they've been trying for weeks. And, Acosta was pretty open today. His bike is like 60% to being a race bike. So they've got 2 more days to bolt it all together. And it'll be the last day in Buriram, which is a circuit that arguably is a bit better for them anyway. That'll be whenever we kind of get a sense of where they fit into the puzzle this year.
My only, my big, the KTM feels like the exact same thing as every year. So saying, KTM's had a bad test, a bad preseason, like every time I do that, they just immediately comes back to bite me right away. So I'm definitely not doing that. I refuse to do that. They just work in a different way to other manufacturers. What I would say is that it is kind of interesting that only Acosta has really popped up towards the sharp end of the timing screens through the 3 days. Not Brad Binder, not the 2 new Tech 3 guys, of whom Enea Bastianini has been reasonably vocal about some adaptation difficulties to the new for him bike, whereas Marc has been a lot more sunshine and rainbows, generally speaking. But so that part's a little surprising. KTM's test on lap times becomes respectable if you look at Acosta, but just Acosta, which I don't know. Brad Binder has never been much of a testing guy, certainly, but even still, even with Acosta being a fair bit ahead, that's with a single lap that didn't really come together, it sounds like. And if you look at the lap times, that assessment is good because otherwise the gap's a bit much. But if it didn't quite come together, then fine. With a sprint simulation, that's a bit on the disappointing side, but for which he said the tire didn't work, basically. So I don't know. There's still 2 enigmas that we're not much closer to answering. One is, what's the KTM level, which again is a question from track to track, unfortunately. But the second is, what's the state of play between the 4 guys? What if Pedro Acosta has actually taken the second-year leap relative to his teammates? I don't think we definitely have to wait until at least the Buriram test to have even a sliding thing.
Yeah, if KTM wanted to really emphasize its business as usual point, the best thing to do was to be a bit slow and confusing in a test. If it come along and gone fast, like, no, you're just showing off to give a good impression. You're in trouble. But yeah, it's a really interesting point about Acosta relative to the others, Val, as well, and whether actually, if there is a problem here, Acosta could be dragging it forwards and the rest be, struggling. Interesting, though. I mean, we talked a lot when they signed Bastianini and Vinales in terms of those two have got their peaky tendencies. They work very well in certain situations. If you start hearing adaptation being discussed by either of those guys, it's maybe a bit of a worry. But yeah, we're talking about one test when they haven't put all the bits on the bike. Let's revisit that conversation, rounds 1, 2, and 3, and see where the Tech 3 bikes are. When do we get to Cota? Vinales might just win that anyway. He'd have to beat Marquez on the factory Ducati.
If he does, he retires on the spot, right?
Well, because he's ticked his box of winning on every manufacturer that could possibly.
Yeah, he's one of fourth manufacturer. Yeah. That's it. It's done then. Just walk away. Or immediately defect to Cassini.
Yeah.
What, you don't think he takes the 26 Honda factory offer? Which, remember, there are seats going for there.
Ooh, no.
Oh man, I hope this clip pops up in the end of season, sort of our predictions type of thing.
Yeah, so this hasn't been a predictions episode, but I feel like we've said a lot of things in this that I now need to write down and then look back on like December 21st when they're working out the end of season episode where we revisit everything we were wrong about. So, but for now, we've confidently predicted Yamaha versus Ducati at the front in some combination, but probably still an all Ducati 2025 rider title fight. Thank you, Val. Thank you, Simon. Nice to have you both back together. Simon's off to the Bangkok mega launch event. That's a really well, we are videoing this. We might put some clips out. Simon's facial expression when I talked about the Bangkok mega launch, I can't even tell what he's trying to.
I should point out, this is the same facial expression that everyone in MotoGP has when the Bangkok launch is mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So listeners, keep an eye on the Race MotoGP social channels and the website, and we'll put something out on the Race Members Club on Patreon as well with Simon's reaction to the big launch event on Sunday, which I think we all agree it's good to be trying something like that. But let's see how this one goes. Right.
you know the old saying about perfection being the enemy of good. That's kind of the motto of the launch. It's trying to be all singing, all dancing. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Let's leave it there. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Val and Simon. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel as well for the sort of video version of this, which includes a Miguel Oliveira interrupting Simon cameo. We'll be back on Patreon and on the social channels after the launch on Sunday, and back with, I'm going to say, an end of Test 2 podcast on Thursday, but that depends on what happens on Wednesday. And if we
said that last week.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Thank you, listeners. We'll see you at some point in the future.
The Athletic.